This podcast is brought to you by Purposefully Different Productions and is proudly sponsored by Little Dish, makers of delicious fresh meals for kids that are an absolute lifesaver on busy days. I love these meals because they are different to other kids' meals out there. They include a variety of ingredients, lots of textures, and are made with little taste buds in mind. Before we get started on today's episode, here's a word from our friend Giovanna Fletcher.
At Little Dish, we've spent years perfecting delicious, healthy, fresh meals guaranteed to be eaten by kids. Except when you sprinkle cheese on top instead of letting them do it, or if the little dish is served on the red plate or the yellow plate or the blue plate, or when you talk over them, or when they can't wear their reindeer antlers because it's summer and they're in the loft, or on Mondays or on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and potentially even Sundays. Good luck and Godspeed. Little Dish. Healthy food kids love. Find us in the chill dial.
Hello and welcome back to How to Feed with me, Charlotte Stirling-Reed, the parenting podcast that brings you reassurance, confidence and practical advice on feeding your baby, your toddler and your whole family. In today's episode, we're talking about something that so many parents face, but often you don't hear enough about. And that's how to communicate with grandparents, nursery teams and other caregivers about feeding your little one. So whether it's managing different opinions around food, sticking to routines, or simply making sure that everybody is on the same page, it can feel quite tricky to navigate. We'll be exploring practical ways to open up conversations, how to approach common challenges with kindness and confidence, and how to keep mealtimes consistent and positive no matter who is at the table. Whether you're just starting to share care with others or whether you're feeling the tension of different views around food, this episode is full of supportive guidance to help you feel more in control while still keeping things collaborative and calm. So let's get into it. First of all, talking to grandparents about feeding. Understanding the role of grandparents in childcare. Grandparents can play an important role in a child's life, and for many families, they're absolute lifelines when it comes to childcare. In fact, in the UK alone, it's estimated that around 5 million grandparents provide regular childcare for their grandchildren, with many of them stepping in at least once a week. That's a huge contribution and one that truly deserves a lot of recognition and appreciation. So whether it's helping out while parents return to work, offering support during school holidays, or just being a consistent and loving presence in a child's life, the support grandparents provide is honestly invaluable. But with that support, especially when it comes to feeding, things can sometimes get a little tricky. Over the years, I've seen time and time again how feeding differences between parents and grandparents can cause stress, confusion, and even a bit of tension with families. And it's really easy to understand why. Many grandparents want to spoil their grandchildren with treats or sweets, cakes, ice cream, or they might prefer feeding methods from their own parenting days. And that could mean offering solids earlier, using baby rice as the first food, or simply relying more on processed and convenience foods that were once considered more the norm. Of course, none of this comes from a bad place. It's usually coming from love or tradition and a desire to nurture. But as modern feeding advice evolves, it's natural that approaches shift, and that can sometimes feel like a clash between those generations. So how can you have those conversations, the ones that set boundaries while still honouring the love and the care that grandparents provide? Here are some tips to help open up that conversation in a way that's positive, respectful and collaborative. And if you're looking for more examples, be sure to check out my episode with Lorraine Kelly and her lovely daughter Rosie. It was such a warming episode. So how to have the conversation. Number 1. Start with gratitude and appreciation. Before diving into anything tricky, begin with a genuine thanks. Acknowledge how lucky your child is to have such a hand-on grandparent and highlight some of the lovely, specific things that they do. For example, the kids love having breakfast at your house, or Sally always talks about how much she loves it when you read a book to her. This helps set a positive tone and reminds them that they are valued, which makes any follow-up conversation much easier to navigate. Number 2, pick the right time. Try to avoid having the conversation when emotions are running high. For example, right after a disagreement or with an incident involving lots of ice cream and a refused dinner, for example. Instead, choose a calm moment when you're both relaxed and can chat without the pressure. Ideally, this is a conversation to try and have before weaning starts or before the first babysitting day that's going to involve food. And that way, it's proactive rather than reactive. Number 3, open the conversation gently. You might begin with sharing something new that you've learned, perhaps a recent study, a book you've read, or some updated guidance from trusted sources like the NHS. Be curious too. Ask how they've approached feeding when they were raising their children. Framing it as a two-way conversation rather than a lecture can really help to avoid defensiveness and invites them to reflect and share their experiences, which honestly many grandparents will love. Number 4, share your feeding philosophy in a non-confrontational way. Explain what you're hoping to do with your baby's food journey and why. For example, you might talk about how modern advice encourages variety, less sugar, more exposure to veg and textures. Visuals can help too. Maybe a quick graphic or a guide, or even just pointing them to something that you found helpful yourself. This approach isn't about criticising the past, but gently bringing them on board with what's best for your baby right now. Number 5, provide practical, friendly resources. It can really help to have some go-to materials to share. Maybe a blog post, NHS guidelines, or even one of my Instagram reels or podcast episodes could help too. You could even suggest watching or reading something together to make it feel more like a shared learning experience. The key really is to offer it in a light and supportive way and not as a correction, but as something useful that maybe the two of you can enjoy together. Number 6, make it a collaborative discussion. This isn't about laying down rules and walking away. It's about working together. Maybe ask for their input and invite their ideas. You might plan a few meals together or talk about your child's favourite foods and snacks. Even better, invite them to join in a mealtime at your house and let them see how your approach works in practice. Sometimes seeing how much your little one enjoys healthier options can be all the encouragement they need. Just remember, feeding can feel like a deeply personal part of parenting, but it doesn't have to be a battleground. With a bit of empathy, some open communication, and a shared focus on your baby's well-being, hopefully you can find a middle ground that works for everybody. And remember, the goal really isn't about perfection. It's about progress, understanding, and connection. So here are some common concerns around grandparents and some helpful solutions. As we've discussed, navigating the grandparent dynamic when it comes to feeding your little one can cause some concerns and conflict. It's totally normal to feel a bit unsure, especially when advice is being given or treats are flowing freely from grandparents. So here are some common concerns I hear, along with some gentle ways that you can handle them. If you're worried about grandparents offering too many treats, you are definitely not alone in this one. It is such a common one. You could try suggesting alternatives that your little one already loves. Maybe it's sweet corn, Weetabix, or their favourite fruit, for example. Let grandparents see how much your little one likes these foods and how they are still special for them. Offer other ways to make time together feel special too. So it might be trips to the park, reading books together, drawing together, or even baking something simple can feel just as much of a treat to little ones. Give ideas for healthier snacks that your child enjoys and maybe even prep a few ahead of time. For example, my son always loved watermelon or little homemade energy balls, so I often pack those up when he's visiting his grandparents. And most importantly, don't be afraid to share your boundaries. Framing it as a team effort, working towards a compromise can go a really long way. If old school of feeding advice is coming your way, it's totally natural that grandparents are often drawing on what worked for them years ago. But we need to gently explain that guidelines have changed and why. You might say that we now have a lot more research into infant feeding, or that actually types of food available have changed dramatically. And if it helps, share official advice from sources like the NHS, the World Health Organization, so it isn't actually coming from you. That little bit of distance can make these conversations so much easier. And sometimes a simple explanation is that the food environment today is very different. Hello, ultra-processed foods. And this can help grandparents to understand it all from your own perspective. If you're worried about portion sizes or how much your little one is eating, this one comes up often with grandparents too, especially when little ones eat less than may be expected. Share your approach and the why behind it. And I actually have a whole podcast episode on responsive feeding and portion sizes if that might be helpful. If you can, invite grandparents to a mealtime so they can see how things work in your home. Sometimes seeing it in action is more effective than explaining it. Explain your view on food not being used as a reward or punishment, and feel free to point them to blogs and podcasts like mine to delve deeper into this research. And remember, grandparents are only with your child now and then. So it's absolutely fine to let the little things slide if this is the case. But if it is more regular or it's something that's really concerning you about their approach to food, try and approach this with warmth and understanding and open the door to respectful and honest conversations. You're doing a brilliant job. These chats can be tricky, but they're also a chance to bring everyone together in supporting and offering care to your little ones. Section 2, navigating nursery or childminder feeding practices, what you need to know. One of the things that comes up so often in conversation with parents is nursery or childminder food. It's a biggie, and understandably so. These early years are absolutely crucial for helping little ones to build a positive relationship with food, and naturally, we want to make sure that they're being offered the kind of meals and snacks that we'd be happy to be offering ourselves at home. The tricky thing is that feeding practices can vary so much from one nursery to the next. Some are brilliant. They really prioritise nutrition, have well-trained staff, and communicate beautifully with parents, and others, not so much. But there's some good news. The government has made updates to the Early Years Foundation Stage Statutory Framework, which is called the EYFS, which now includes nutrition guidance. In simple terms, that means that childcare settings are expected to follow certain standards when it comes to the food they offer, unless they have a very good reason not to. That said, while many nurseries and childminders do follow these guidelines, research shows that a lot still don't. In fact, previous statistics suggest that only around 21% to just under 50% of settings were actually sticking to the old government guidance. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But what should you expect from your nursery setting? Let's take a moment to walk through what good nutrition feeding practices typically look like, just so you've got a clear picture of what's reasonable to ask for on a check-in. Number 1, balanced meals. Ideally, meals should include a good mix of food groups, whole grains, protein, fruits and veg, and some dairy or alternatives. Number 2, healthy snacks. These might include fruit, toast, breadsticks, something nourishing but simple. Snacks should ideally be balanced and not too sugar heavy as well. Number 3, regular meal times. Many nurseries offer breakfast, lunch, tea, and sometimes a side course or second course. This structure helps give kids consistent opportunities to eat throughout the day. Number 4, milk and water only. These are the recommended drinks. If juice is offered, it should be 100% fruit juice and well diluted. Number 5, age-appropriate textures. Food should be offered in a way that is safe and manageable for your own child's age and stage. Think mashed, chopped, or finger foods, depending on what they can actually handle. And choking hazards, they should definitely be being avoided. Number 6, eating environments that support children. Mealtime should be made separate from playtime and also relatively calm, giving kids space to focus on their food and enjoy eating with their friends. Number 7, a clear food policy. Many nurseries or childminders will have a food policy, so don't be afraid to ask for it. It should explain what's offered, how food is served, and even give insight into the eating environment at nursery. Number 8, trained staff. Some settings offer formal nutrition training and others may rely more on experience, but either way, there should always be first aid trained staff present during these meals. 9, communication. A lot of nurseries will share updates about what meals and snacks have been served each day, and most will give you feedback about how your little one is getting on. But what if these standards aren't actually being met? Well, first of all, don't panic. You are allowed to speak up and you are allowed to ask questions. I always say that if no one raises any concerns, then the setting simply won't know that anything needs to change. So if you are not happy with something, it's okay to open up a dialogue. Here are some things that might help. Get familiar with the guidelines. You don't need to memorise them, but having a general understanding can be really, really useful. If you go to my website, which is www.srnutrition.co.uk, you will find a blog that I have written all about this for extra support. Additionally, choose a setting that values nutrition. If you're still at the stage of choosing a nursery, ask a few questions about the food provision first. Nurseries that care about food often care about other aspects of children's health more broadly too. Also, ask to see menus. This is a really simple way to get a feel for what food is on offer. And don't be shy to ask how things are made or what ingredients are actually used in those recipes. Keep communicating as well. Once your child is attending a nursery, keep those conversations going. And if you're ever unsure or unhappy, speak up. Change only happens when someone actually raises awareness of needed to change. Ask for alternatives. Many nurseries serve sweet puddings or cakes, even for the under ones. It's completely fine to ask whether a fruit-based alternative could be given instead. I actually did this myself with my son Rafi. I wasn't keen on him having brownies and ice cream in his first year, so I asked the nursery to offer fruit instead, and I also asked them to let me know if or when Rafi started noticing that he was having something different to the other children. Eventually, he did get to that point and they did get in touch. And then I was able to make a decision to move things forward. But until then, he was more than happy to have his fruit and honestly had no idea that he was missing out on anything else. How to talk to your childcare provider about the food on offer. These conversations don't have to be confrontational. In fact, a calm, kind and collaborative approach tends to get the best results. Here are a few tips. Try to be clear and kind. If you have particular needs or preferences, share them as requests and not demands to the nursery. Stay informed. The more you know about the guidelines, the easier it is to have those constructive conversations. Ask for regular feedback. You absolutely have a right to know how your child is doing with food at nursery, so do ask if you're not being updated regularly. Feeding conversations, whether with nurseries, childminders or even grandparents, don't have to feel stressful or uncomfortable. Most of the time, caregivers want to do their best, and a little bit of clear and gentle communication can make such a difference. I really hope this has helped you feel a bit more confident in navigating nursery food, especially with new guidance coming into play soon. If you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Don't be afraid to ask questions or share your concerns, and work together with your childcare provider to support your little one's eating journey. Thank you so much for joining me, Charlotte Stirling-Reed, on How to Feed. And if you found this episode helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and do share it with a family or friend member who you think will find this episode helpful. I'll see you next time for my next episode. This episode of How to Feed wouldn't have been possible without my sponsors, Little Dish. Their meals are fresh, delicious, and made with ingredients that you would find in your own kitchen, making them a brilliant option for busy days.